Hey everybody, Christine here, and what do you do when a homicide goes wrong? An investigation, that is. Do you try to rehabilitate it, or do you just bury it? That seems to be the question that Christopher Whitcomb is asking in his book, Broken Plea. We are here going through chapter 4, talking about, he's outlining all these things about the way the crime scene went crazy, and I hope you will join us. Here he says, that for the moment Officer Nunez arrived on site and labeled Ethan a possible suicide, things started to go downhill. And we see that back in the beginning chapters. We have been going through this chapter by chapter. It is so crazy town that I cannot even give you an overview of the book because I have to go through this piece by piece and we have to connect the dots and then we're going backwards and forwards. I'm astounded, and I think you will be too. I urge you definitely to get the book and we're going to continue to go through it. So Christopher Whitcomb talks about, when Officer Nunez arrived on scene, and like shouts out, it looks like a suicide. And then Talbot, that's the lead investigator, that's the crime scene investigator, wrote that he found the sheath, the sheath, the sheath with the DNA that linked Kohberger to the crime. He found the sheath on the floor. And he writes here that things are stumbling towards chaos. And let's see how he's putting two and two together to get there, okay? He has seen a lot of the stuff that we didn't get to see in the case, and that's what he is specifically arguing here because Kohberger took a plea. So none of this will see the light of day, okay? And me, being a retired detective and law enforcement expert, I love talking about this stuff, and I personally am just questioning as much as you are because I can't believe that Brian took a plea. So let's get into it. Glad to have you here. Let's get into it. Okay, now, as I mentioned when I opened this segment, and I tell you, you got to buy the book so you can keep track of it. Whitcomb, right, he says, about his title of this chapter. Let me grab that. His title of this chapter is beer pong, $2 bill, and the girl in the window, okay? You know what the saying is about the $2 bill, right? That it's just not right, okay? And what he's talking about here is that all this stuff is going wrong. He's arguing on the plea. I think that's why he's saying broken plea. Like I didn't understand that title in the beginning. And so he's talking about broken plea. And he says that he feels it was buried by the courts, okay? And this is one of the things, this is language from the judge. He notes that this is Magistrate Judge Megan E. Marshall on February 25th, 2024. All right, based on the motion to seal, search warrant, and related documents filed herein, the court does hereby confirm an order that the affidavit for search warrant, including any exhibits, search warrant, return of search warrant, including any exhibits and inventories of items seized, and order are confidential, exempt from disclosure, and are sealed pursuant to Idaho Court Administration Rule 32, subsection G, subsection 1, for the reasons stated in the said motion and until April 1st, 2023, she did that on 2024, or further order of the court, whichever comes first. Okay, that seems like a typo. Okay, but I'm just reading it from the book. Now, we don't know. It is our understanding, and I'm going through the book just like you are. We don't know what material Whitcomb got. We don't know if this stuff is still sealed. I have found a repository of some of the police department records, which may have an inventory, evidence inventory, which I could take a look at. I looked at the preliminary report from Brett Payne, I believe it was, where he said they took 56 items, but I think we only counted 51 or 52. That was on a supplement report from the police department. So I can probably cross-reference these deals here. But is the search warrant sealed? We also we're talking now about the Nancy Guthrie case. And they detained, is that the word, 2 folks and did all kinds of searches and search warrants and things like that. And we don't have that, and that is sealed. And from what we understand, we believe that those people may not be part of the investigation. But again, we're not sure. So with Brian Kohberger's plea, are these items still sealed? Okay. Now, Whitcomb is talking about secrecy is good in a prosecution of this nature, right? Because when you're doing stuff like this, they don't want items to get out, okay? And sometimes information is just bad, right? They have to describe things that are bad, but we have public records requests, we have FOIA laws and things like that. And if the case is over, why can't we see them? If people are not considered suspects in an active investigation, or why can't we see it? Okay, so he talks here about things we hear. Police need time to work. Media only messes things up. Investigative journalism. All these things are distractions from the case. And so we being the police, we need to hold these things together so that, we have our case, right? We need to focus. We need to focus on working the case. And then, oh my gosh, he uses my word here. He says, perhaps it doesn't even matter at this point because the proof is in the pudding. And I use that all the time when it comes to forensic genetic genealogy, because when I talk about proving a case, that's what I say. The proof is in the pudding. And there's a recipe for pudding, okay? There's a recipe for getting to proof in forensic genetic genealogy. So now he says, police have opened their files showing how the case was solved, what they found, who they talked to, and when they first made sense of the facts. Everything looked copacetic. That's another word that my grandmother used. Once Kohberger pled guilty, okay? So it sounds like from what he's saying, we should have all this material. Now, he says even if we agree that justice has been done, he talks about wrongful convictions, right? That we have to be mindful of that. He talks about human error, okay? And things that just happen. He says, let me post this for you guys because I think this is interesting. Hold on a second. Okay, remember, he's talking about everything being in chaos, right? And the investigation and all this stuff. And he's saying here, this is Whitcomb's words. No one would claim, for example, that the Moscow Police Department had everything it needed to investigate a quadruple homicide with 35 sworn officers in a tax base of 25,000 people. I mean, that's pretty good for 25,000 people with 35 sworn officers. Okay, that's pretty good. But he's recognizing, right? We talked about this. How often does stuff like this happen? Were they trained in it? Were they prepared for it? Then he mentions here, Bill Thompson's office, that's the prosecutor, was likely short-staffed and underpaid. Okay, that's a prosecutor. And he's bringing this up because, believe it or not, the prosecutor does have a responsibility to investigate and make sure, one, that the defense has everything, but B, that the charges are accurate. They can't have a miscarriage of justice, right? They're ethically responsible for that. And he says, we assume that Ann Taylor was state certified to defend murder cases, but that was not her primary responsibility. Now, I think we saw earlier in one of the chapters that she had to, I don't want to say recuse herself, but it sounded like she was working for the public defender's office and then went on her own because of some potential conflict. Okay. Now, I don't know, I'm not an attorney. I don't know if people have to be, at least in Idaho, state certified to defend murder cases. Okay? How do you get state certified if you haven't done it before? But he says that was not her primary responsibility. And he says even the state police were limited compared to law enforcement in other more populous geographies with standards that allowed detectives like Talbot to file evidence reports 3 weeks after collection. Now, I think we talked about this. Standard operating procedures. We talked about accreditation of police departments, that police departments have their standard operating procedures, and then accrediting agencies have their own standard operating procedures. And then there's just things that are done. And I like to see in my department, you had to file your report before you went home, come hell or high water. Okay. Now, as a detective, you had a little leeway, but not 3 weeks. Not 3 weeks. I don't understand that myself. So I don't know. Okay. So what do you think? Right. So he's saying that, I guess, despite some of the things that Whitcomb has pointed out, they were already handicapped. Maybe. Should we say that? Okay. Let's keep going. All right, we also talked about scrutiny. We talked about perspective, okay? Whose perspective is it? And whose perspective are we looking at this? Are we looking at it the jury's perspective, the defense perspective, the state perspective, the judge's perspective? And he talks about how do you go back even early in the investigation, and he's talking about because, we're still on the initial response, right? When the evidence was collected, he's placing us in the scene. Okay. So he's saying if we were there, okay, so pretend we're there. And granted, we're not all the way at the end. How do we make sense of diluted blood stains? He references the posing of Kaylee and Maddie's bodies. And he says baffling statements by 2 surviving witnesses. Now, we've talked about that. It doesn't make sense, okay? Then he says, and this is a quote, he says, the living room presents a roiling storm of doubt. I mean, he likes his word choices here, okay? So he talks about scrutiny. He says we have to look into this, okay? And this is what happens in preparation for trial. I mean, there's a part of it that has to happen when the prosecution gets the case, and they need to make sure that they've got a good case. The same as the defense needs to, really make sure that the prosecution has a good case, okay? They got to dig in. And remember, Whitcomb talked about the volumes and volumes and volumes of material here. So he says, this is his word, there are secrets buried in Bill Thompson's Brady disclosure, and it is our job to reveal them. Okay, Bill Thompson's a prosecutor, okay? And Brady, remember with Brady, they have to turn over exculpatory information. All right? So, sounds interesting, huh? He leaves us with these cliffhangers, right? Okay. So he says, before we delve deeper, several things require stipulation. Now, a stipulation is an agreement between the parties. So him as the author and you as the reader, we're going to agree to these things. This is him speaking. First, I hold no forensic analysis certification from any accredited association, organization, or school. Neither do I. Most cops don't. So do we believe in the paper or do we not believe in the paper? That, for me, it is the subject of when we talk online and you want to know my thoughts on that, or in another video, maybe we'll talk about it in another case, especially when it comes to genetic genealogy, okay? All these labs and folks with these things, and most cops, we don't have that. Okay, a lot of cops don't even have a college degree. Okay, he's a Fed, he's a little different, but that's the reality of it. Ain't no fancy piece of paper gonna replace your brain. Okay, all right. So he says he has a master's degree from the University of Virginia and 15 years of investigative experience as a special agent with the FBI, but no training in forensics. Now, what I understand, I've never, been in there, rode with them or any of that. I just know from interacting with them. But it seems to me that they have a specific forensic group, and then they have the regular agent group. Okay, so he probably falls under the agent group. Like in the police department, if the police department has a lab, which most police departments don't, the lab is completely separate. You don't have cops in the lab. Cops are copping and labs are labbing. Okay, so this is not abnormal. He says his testimony as a court-certified expert in statement analysis, I'm a court-qualified expert in law enforcement policies and procedures, okay? So he's a court-qualified expert in statement analysis. Statements. That could be written statements, verbal statements, okay? And he says his expertise helped put a serial killer named Oscar Ray Bolin to death, but he holds no degree in criminology. Okay, so I have a bachelor's in criminal justice. So I don't know what his master's degree is, whatever, but he's got 15 years on the street, okay? And he's qualified in statement analysis. So that probably means he's reading these police reports and he's focusing on, remember now, he's hit on the statement from the witnesses. That's his specialty. Okay, I haven't Googled him, but just reading this here, I can tell you that's his specialty. So the words in the writing, very specific to him, right? And he's given us these zingers here. So he loves his wordsmithing, okay? That's why he's given us these zingers. So we need to pay very good attention. Remember I told you I think he has like a little sarcastic tone here. We have to pay attention to his writing because he's focused on the wording and what is being said. Okay. So he also mentions cold case investigation is a fast developing discipline. I have to disagree with that. Let me read the whole sentence and then I'll come on that. Cold case investigation is a fast developing discipline aimed at foisting, here's his words, foisting new techniques upon legacy methods. So cold cases and cold case investigations have been since the beginning of time. Okay, the dinosaur here, cop dinosaur. We had cold cases and we worked cold cases all the time. The difference now is that we have new technology. Okay, back then we had fingerprints, we had tool marks. I don't even remember when I think NIBIN had just started coming online. We didn't have CODIS. Did we have CODIS? No, we didn't have CODIS when I left. And so that's amazing, right? And now we have genetic genealogy. So yeah, you know what? I'm going to foist. I will take responsibility for foisting because y'all should be using it. And I get you're an old dog and you don't want to have to learn new stuff. That's okay. We can train people. I will train somebody that's interested. Nobody wants to be in the lab necessarily. Us street folks, we don't want to be in the lab. I don't care about fingerprints. I mean, I love fingerprints when they solve crimes, but I don't want to be doing that. I don't want to be looking at the guns and the bullets and all that stuff. That's why I'm not a surgeon. I don't want all that. But I love genetic genealogy. I love finding suspects. Okay. I even like the CODIS stuff, but the CODIS stuff is kind of boring because you put it in there and the name pops out. You put it in there and it pops out. It either does or doesn't. Me, I get to investigate with forensic genetic genealogy. So I am going to foist all day long. I am foisting forensic genetic genealogy because y'all need to use it. All y'all police departments. Has to be done. Has to be done. It's amazing. Maybe he has not seen a case come together. We haven't gotten there. We haven't heard what he's going to say about the forensic genetic genealogy, so we don't know. Okay. He says, foisting new techniques on legacy methods. he talks about homicide investigators focusing on acute onset crisis. That means being called out when the caca has gone down. Okay, I've been woken up in the middle of the night enough times. You got to get your rear end there. Okay. I have a few bones to pick with him, apparently. He says cold case investigators have the benefit of objectivity and perspective. So maybe he's applying that to himself, okay? Because, yeah, as a homicide investigator, real time on the street, as a cop, real time on the street instead of sitting behind the screen, truth, you're in it and you have to think critically and you have to manage all of that, right? We talked about the cops nowadays not remembering and not notating enough to write their reports. They rely on the camera. You have to be in it to win it, no matter what. And cops today, this is my opinion, are not the same as I was and my group of cops. They're not the same. Okay. So, he goes on. Cold case investigators don't face pressure from the media, politicians, or family members, or the strident cries of an outraged public. Oddly enough, time becomes an asset. No, I disagree. I complain all the time about these cold cases. I just got back from cold cases from 1950 because I'm ticked off. Okay, and I call the news and I get the news involved because it needs to be done. Anyhow, that's whatever. That's his thing. Okay, he also talks about chaos theory. He says that chaos theory is taught in the world's finest universities, but cops eschew it. Eschew it. Is it eschew it? Eschew it? Eschew it. Whatever. They blow it off. Okay. Oh, I don't even know what those words are. Let's see. Social media, game theorists. He says, he's like lighting a fire. Scientists avoid simple paths like rationale and assumption in favor of logic, but cops do not. No. Black and white, baby. I do not have gray. Black and white, baby. And logical. Logical. Okay. He says if we decide to lean on Lorenz to build new models of inquiry, we need to anticipate resistance from authorities. Okay. Not really sure. Okay. He's going to town here. Let me see if I can find, if I can slice and dice this for you. He's on a tear here. Okay, like I said, he's on a tear here. And he says, finally, as odd as this might sound to fans of crime and punishment, none of this new, this chaos and all this stuff is new to the U.S. DOJ. When it comes to the antiquated state of crime scene investigations, they agree completely. In fact, they put it in writing. Okay? He talks about standards and all this stuff. He says there are no nationally accepted guidelines or standards of practice for individuals performing death scene investigations. No professional degree, license, certification, or minimum educational requirements exist, nor is there a commonly accepted training curriculum. Yes. Now, I do have one for forensic genetic genealogy, but okay. We cannot even point to a common job title for the thousands of people who routinely perform death investigations in this country. Well, we got some in the medical examiner. We got some in the police department, right? We got the crime scene investigators. Some detectives are called homicide investigators. Some are not. He says, at the risk of sounding like a shill for the defense, how could it be that the DOJ itself admits such insufficiencies? Okay, so he is just going on and on and on and on. And then he goes down to one point here. Let me grab that for you because I have the same question. Before I do that, I want to ask you a question. because so many of you have commented on this in the preceding videos. And he's talking about this chaos, this lack of training and all this stuff. And a lot of people have mentioned cover up. So to the point where we are now, do you think it's cover up? Or do you think it's incompetency? Or both, right? What I'm trying to put this in line with your thoughts and opinions and your perceptions, right? Is it completely incompetency because this chaos that he describes? Or is it just purposeful? Okay, so he's saying here, he's bringing up another good point here. We live in an age when algorithms predict which clothes you'll buy, songs you'll sing along with, restaurants you might frequent on vacation. Your cell phone uses AI to gather your news, predict social media interactions, guide you from place to place based on data. How is it possible that state-of-the-art technologies like DNA analysis and cell tower triangulation can be used to identify a killer despite a history of misinterpretation? Now, I've seen it all the time. We got Karen Reed's case with John, I can't remember his last name. And like I said, I should. Was it Boston? No, it was, anyway, over that way. And they were saying this, the cell phone's saying this, the cell phone's saying that, the car's saying this is saying that. And yes, okay, so it's who says what. It's whose interpretation of the data. It seems to be no fact, or it's the interpretation of the fact. Again, the perspective. And here's what he says here. How then do we proceed? How do we accept Kohberger's admission of guilt while acknowledging that facts seem sufficient to doubt them? And this is the question that I've been asking even before this book. I knew none of this. I was going solely on, I'll make my representation here, the DNA on that snap. Now, I will tell you, forensic genetic genealogy is 100% right. It's 100% right. And we prove it through STR, okay? So when you get there, you get there. But going to, and I'm going to record a video on this, going to the DNA's there versus the activity. My question was, you mean there's nothing else in that house? Like, before I read this book, that was like, how would he plead? Okay, I was worried about the trial because I didn't feel that was going to suffice, that they were going to get it. And he pled. I was like, y'all got lucky. Y'all got lucky. And we have to say now I'm like, oh my God, why? Why? Okay, not that we want the killer to go free, but we have to say, remember, the defendant is innocent until proven guilty. And the Constitution and the constitutional protections are there for everybody. For everybody, if something would happen to us. I'm dumbfounded. Somebody wrote gobsmacked. Yes! Like, I'm looking at this stuff like you're looking at this stuff. Like, So is it... Is it because they didn't use anything else? They didn't look at anything else? I don't know, but we have to look into this because it isn't making sense. All right, so you know, he mentions, right, he's the author, Whitcomb, he's bringing us into it, like we through him are looking into what he's seen. Okay, so we're looking back into it, and we have just arrived on scene, gone through the house, and collected evidence. And we're looking at it like, okay, right? So he says with this Kohberger thing, like, how could he have pled guilty? Like, we're all like, where'd that blood come from? Who's that? What was that? Where'd that knife come from? 3 manners of death? I mean, right? We can go on and on. The cell phone, he says the cell phone, they didn't have that, and they said they have it. Like, who's on first or third or however that thing goes? Okay. So he says, let's start with the file tells us. He's talking about the discovery, the police reports, the evidence, the whole thing, the file. And he says that we know that Dylan Mortensen's first two statements, from her first two statements, that witness recollections can be sketchy. And yes, eyewitness testimony is all kinds of problematic, okay, for a number of reasons. He says, okay, next, we know that the reports by Officer Nunez and Warner are different than what the body cam shows, right? He also says that we've got the delayed call to the police. Yeah, like, what the heck? Like, you see a masked guy in your house, I would be calling, wouldn't you? And then we have Hunter, right? We've talked about Hunter. And then he says we've got, so far, right, we're catching up to where we are. We've got Talbot's report that contradicts his handwritten receipt. Remember, he had that piece of paper that he took around with him. Remember, I think we have sheath on the floor, sheath on the bed, and blood stains. The blood. Remember the fluid, the blood, the fluid on the table. Okay. Then they talk about the state's expert, Miss Sutton. Okay, and the plea hearing summation, which Mr. Whitcomb has been like, no. Okay. So here we are. Okay, what do we do? Holy crud, what do we do? Our team, like, what are we going to do? So he says, in order to map a path through this chaos, we need to find a beginning, a center, a time and place from which all change flows. Like, where did it start to go south? Okay. He says, fortunately, we can agree on certain things, including the fact that at 4 a.m. on November 13th, 2022, like, this is getting pretty basic, y'all. There was a 3-story house near the middle of the U of I campus. The midpoint of the house was its open second floor. At the center of the second floor was a living room. In the center of the living room stood a white folding table. Everything that happened early Sunday morning had to pass through it. And I don't know if he's talking about Sunday morning with the police or Sunday morning with the bad guy. Okay? So let me see. So he continues and he says, I think he's talking about the killer's movements. He says, police seem to agree. The reports map the killer's movement, stating that he entered through the sliding glass doors in the kitchen. He would have been on that second floor before going upstairs to attack Maddie and Kaylee. He's saying this, Whitcomb. Evidence shows he came back down to the second floor, and we've got that blood trail on the banister and the wall. And then he encountered Zaina by the door to Dylan's room. This is his words. He chased her through the living room. Now, could that be where we got our swipes on the wall? Turned left down the hallway, going into her room, and killed her. He says that police believe the killer fled the second floor after encountering Dylan just moments before she ran downstairs to Bethany. Because remember when she came out and checked, she reportedly opened her door several times. Okay. Now, he also says that it seems that the police, the criminalist for the state, Miss Sutton, agrees too. And she talks about, let me put that up. Okay, now put a little diagram up there, although the furniture, when I was drawing on it, got removed. Okay, he says, and that graphic is from News Nation. Thank you very much. Okay, so he says, Sutton agreed enough to describe the living room in detail. That's the criminalist. Within this area, there's a sofa, a television, and a beer pong table. She wrote on page 62 of her forensic analysis. A metal framed console table is partially visible against the wall opposite the sofa. Okay, so we think that was over here. And I don't remember if we mapped out where the beer pong table was. Okay. So he's saying that if we're saying that the center of the house was important, right? So we have a floor above, we have the middle floor where he came in and out, right? He's coming in and out here. And then we have the downstairs where he apparently didn't go. Okay. So the main focus is in this second floor area. So he says, okay, well, we understand that this is a beer pong table, okay, in a party house. No one questions its placement. They did not find it odd that 10 cups were neatly arranged at one end with 10 others strewn wildly from the other. Okay, so let me go back. I want to see if I can find out where this pool table was, or the pong table. Okay, so I looked at it and the pong table was right here, and it says it was partially blocking the hallway here. Now, we don't know which, so I'm assuming, I don't want to, hold on a second. Okay, so let's say this is our pong table. And they're saying that there are 10, I don't know if I can draw on this. Oops. There are 10 cups set up at one end. I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I know they're supposed to be like this or whatever. Okay. Maybe. I don't know. I haven't played that in a long time. And then the rest of them are like down at one end, and we don't know which end. They're all skewed all over the place. So how did that happen? How did that happen? That's where he's getting at. Like, did anybody not pay attention to what was up with the pong table? So they're saying, why is it in blocking the doorway? If I was in the bedroom and coming in and out of the bedroom, I wouldn't want it blocked. I would be moving out of the way. Like, if the game is over and the pong is over, I would get out of the way because I don't want to keep running into it. You got to run into it going in and out of the house and in the kitchen and stuff like that, right? So I think where he's getting here is he's saying, did the killer move it? Did the killer hit the table, knock the table, move the table? We don't know. Okay. So he says that, they didn't find it odd that the 10 were neat on one end and not neat on the other. He also says, what about how after killing Kaylee and Maddie, okay, upstairs on the third floor, 185-pound blood-soaked Kohberger chased a frantic Zaina through a space occupied by the table without moving it an inch. And he references here Bill Thompson, the prosecutor himself, that the prosecutor said immediately after killing Zaina and Ethan, Kohberger fled back around the table on his way out the door. Okay, so he would have had to come out here and go out here. So if this table is in the way, like he didn't hit the table, well, is Whitcomb saying he did hit the table? He says, like, did they even pay attention to the table? Then he talks about the experts' blood stains on the table, but nobody questioned how they got there. And these are the ones that are the deluded ones, apparently. Some that, what do we have? The guy with the T. Talbot, I think he said that they were fluid. And then other people are saying that they were so faint that you couldn't see them. And then whatever they were diluted. Remember? And the kitchen knife, we think, that Hunter had was on top of them. Okay? So then Sutton's talking, this is Whitcomb talking about with Sutton, talking about the blood spatter on the knee wall. I don't know what a knee wall is. Maybe that's here because the stairs come up. Maybe that's here. And then Officer Nunes' body camera shows them having to turn sideways to navigate the table. So, going down the hallway like this. Now, let me tell you, when you're in uniform and you got all that stuff on your belt, you are wide. And you have to get used to it. When you are a new officer and you put all that stuff on your belt, you run into everything. Okay? And you have to judge your width because you have to get used to it. But yeah, so he's going sideways. And then he's saying, but Nunes never questioned how Zaina dodged it running. And I'll remember I said, I thought maybe something happened in the living room here. And then he's talking about Talbot with the blood, no shape, placement. Okay, he's got a new thing here. He says, various reports mention the solo cups without questioning why some stand upright while others lie scattered. Detectives did not find it odd that a Corona Light bottle and a bowl of popcorn somehow escaped disruption. I'm guessing they were on the table. They did not bother to explain how Zaina's blood ended up on the table's left side. Now, I'm just going to make an assumption here, a projection, okay, that if this was our little table, I can't take all my little solo cups with it. I'm using Canva here. Let me see if I can do this. Okay. We'll have show and tell. So let's say here's our table. Okay. I know it's a little bit bigger. Let's see if we can get it. Okay, maybe it's like that. Okay. So, apparently there's a Corona bottle. I don't know. It doesn't say on the table. And the popcorn. And we don't know where her blood ended up. And we don't know which side the solo cups were good and which side the solo cups were bad. But somebody coming out of here with their hand could have hit these solo cups, or I don't know, the wind, like however everybody's coming down, or fighting in this room. Now, if the little pony wall or whatever it is they're talking about is right here, that would kind of make sense that there was some kind of altercation here. If, let me see if I can put I don't want to mess my screen up. Let me see if I can put the pony wall in here. Let's see, I've got the little pony wall they're talking about here. And remember all those swipes and stains? It sounds like there was a tussle right there. And remember, didn't we hear somebody went downstairs and came back up? was it Kaylee or was it Zena? Or did we think it was Kaylee, but it was really Zena, right? Didn't we, somebody was fleeing and went into the bathroom or something, right? Okay. So he's saying, why didn't they pay attention to that? And you can ask, is it confirmation bias? Is it somebody that thinks that they have an idea what happened and they excluded any other possible? I mean, and again, I hate to mention Nancy's case, but we see it. Man, you take everything. They've had discussions ad nauseum about this. You take everything. If you don't know, you take everything. Because you're going to need it later. 100%. Abso-freaking-lutely. It's better to take too much than not enough. So, now, we also have what I feel is a disconnect between CSI and detectives. And we've talked about that in other videos. The fact that if they're not talking and being led about what's important or what the theories, not just one, theories are, remember that an evidence collection, in this case, I think they had 12 hours? So they would have had time to get statements and everything like this. But typically on a fresh call out scene, everybody's there and everybody's bagging and tagging before detectives have even developed their theories in some cases, okay? So I don't like it when the lab folks are taking stuff or picking through or deciding. It's not a controlled thing. It's just that they don't have an idea what happened. They're not talking to the witnesses and the victims. Also, further going to when the stuff is being tested in the lab, and I know we talked about this. Well, we use our pen. Which part of the item are you going to swab? I'm like, you go for the whole thing. But no, the lab person says, well, I think, this is the lever to make the pen work. Okay, I'll maybe they're going to go right here because that's where you write it. I mean, we don't know. And so I do think that you can have problems there. He talks about stain 39, diluted blood, which is on the beer pong table. And he says that comes back to Kaylee. That comes back to Kaylee on the 3rd floor. So somebody was dripping from the 3rd floor, right? Because he described that Kaylee did not move. So somebody dripped Kaylee. Sorry, don't mean to be gross. Somebody dripped Kaylee's blood from the 3rd floor. And it says here, hold on. This is from Sutton's report. The presence of an overturned cup in the vicinity of stain 39 is a potential source of the dilution if the cup contained a liquid at some time or if it was part of the setup for a beer pong game. Did they test it? Okay, and I'm not a lab person, but did they test it for the presence of alcohol or beer or whatever was in there? Did any of the cups have residue? In Idaho, I mean, how much do you have? You have a shot in a beer pong thing, don't you? Or you have a full cup? I don't know. I'm displaying my, it's been a while. How much do you put in the beer pong cup? Is there just one drinking cup and then the ball goes into the empty cups and there's a drinking cup? Like, I don't remember, guys. But yeah, so if all 10 cups were empty cups for the ping pong ball to go in and only one is the drinking cup, then do we have enough for the dilution? And what was the dilution? Was somebody drinking water? I mean, we just don't know. Okay, he's going after it. He says that Sutton doesn't explain how she knew the blood was diluted based on photographs. So Sutton, it appears, only reviewed electronic discovery. She probably reviewed reports, but she only reviewed photographs. Okay. Now, they didn't take the Pong table, did they? They didn't. And this is something, again, to not mention Nancy, but we've heard different people. We've got blood spatter folks, whatever, with the ceramic tile on the front patio. They were like, we would take that entire thing up. Okay, they didn't take the mat. Is it the floor mat? Whatever you call it, where you wipe your feet. The doormat. It's not the floor mat. The doormat. They didn't take the doormat. They didn't take the mount for the Ring camera. And somebody else was saying that they would have taken that whole metal screen door. Like they would have, taken the whole dang thing. Okay. And I've seen that. Okay. They cut carpet out. They take mattresses. They take pieces of walls. Yes. Okay. And he also references that with these same stains, Detective Talbot called it liquid. But he says neither of them talk about it being faint, that it was so hard to even see. So he also says nothing in the files indicates there were liquid in any of the overturned cups. Did anybody pay attention that there was liquid in the overturned cups? I mean, did anybody pay attention? We talked about White Claw, right? And then Sutton, okay. So he's saying, how come the prosecutors didn't ask how Sutton, right, who's their criminalist, arrived at the dilution from what was in the solo cup without anything knowing that there was liquid in the cup, right? So it wasn't like there was liquid on the table and there was a trail leading to where the blood was. Okay. And then he says she doesn't acknowledge that the closest overturned cup right here, let's just say, we don't know if this is right, but let's just say that the closest overturned cup was 2 feet from the nearest stain. So maybe these cups were over. I don't know. Or maybe the blood was here when he came out of the room and the overturned cups were here. How long are those tables? That's a 6-foot table. Aren't those Costco tables like 6 foot? We have no idea. It could have been square. We don't know. And he also says that none of the 16 objects found on the table showed any sign of blood. What are the 16 objects on the table? Was there only 10 Pong cups? How many cups do you need for Pong? What were the 16 items? Okay, now I'm confused. And then he asks why the cups, the bottle, the White Claw can, or the bowl were not tested or even seized as evidence. So, yeah, it's a question of, do we take everything or do we not take everything? Like, what do we take? And more is always better because you don't know, even if you get somebody, a defendant, like you arrest somebody in progress and they tell you some kind of crazy story, they lie. They lie. And sometimes they tell the truth later. So you cannot only collect based on what's presented initially, because it comes back to bite you. Ta-da! Okay, let's see what else. Okay, he is going to get into the nitty-gritty of this table and how that all plays out. So we're going to say that, and we're going to start. I'm going to try to do a better table if that will work, so that we can kind of analyze that a little better. So I'm going to end this here, and we will go on to the next one. As always, thanks for watching. Love the feedback. Let me know what you want to see, and thank you for helping me help solve these cases.